Hello and welcome to another video. In this demo, we're just going to have a look at ArcGIS Pro. Now this demo is intended for my students who've got a lot of experience with ArcMap but haven't touched Pro much before. Again, we're really coming from a visualization and imagery background, and that's primarily what we're interested in. However, this should be useful for anyone who's not touched Pro before. Okay, as soon as you open Pro, you should be met with this screen. This gives you an option to open up an existing project, and I'll cover projects more in a second, or to open up a blank template. So ArcGIS Pro uses this projects method of storing tasks, maps, data, rather than MXDs, as we're used to in ArcMap. This seems more akin to City Engine, where all of your work is stored within project, and then your scene sits within that. I personally like this method as it keeps everything in one place. However, you still can add data from outside that project. Okay, so let's create a new project. It doesn't really matter which button we click, that's just the first thing that'll open, and we can add everything else within that project as well. So a project can have as many maps, scenes as you'd like within it. We're going to call that test, give it a nice file name, and that will be stored in this location. I like to have this box checked. That just gives you a nice folder to store everything in it, including the project. Okay, so once that opens, we'll be met with the familiar sort of layout of ArcGIS Pro. Of course, this will change depending on what you had open last time. And just like ArcMap, you can move things around. You can grab everything, drag it out of the way. If you're using two screens, even better, you can move things around. So that's really intuitive. On your left-hand side, you're going to have your table of contents, as you're used to seeing. Probably got your map in the middle. And the right, you can have this catalog view, or anything else you open appear here as well. So you end up with a lot of things down here. The real way it's changed is with the use of ribbons. And this looks a lot like PowerPoint or something like that. So on the left-hand side, we've got a project where we can change options, open up an existing project, save as, change your licenses, etc. Next, we've got the Map tab. Here, we've got buttons to navigate around, create bookmarks, and change that base map to something rare, such as Imagery. And we've got loads of options to add data. You can also add data to this by just dragging things in from catalog, dump to the map. Here we've got options to select things, and we go right. Oh, we've got the measure tool, always useful. Okay, and then finally download data. So we're using this information from the internet. However, if I was working in a small area and I wanted to download data from the internet onto my system to work offline, I'd be able to do that button there. Okay, let's move across the tabs. So here we've got inserts. So currently I'm looking at a project, and within that I've got a map. The first button here lets me add a new map. So I could have more than one map. That might be useful if I'm creating different tasks within the same area. And you can rename all of these. The next thing I can do is add a global or a local scene. I can also add a stereo map. I can also add a layout. So the way I understand it is that your map is pretty much like your data frame. If you want to make a map document that you would print out, you'll add a layout. And this becomes like your layout view, and you can view your data frame on there. So how I would do my workflow is I would create a project with a map in it. I would add some data. I would do my analysis and get that looking good. And then at the end of the process, I would add either a new template or a new layout. I would make it look nice, add the marginalia, your scale bar, etc., etc., and you're good to go. Okay, let's continue to move along the top. Okay, we'll cover this tab in more detail later on. Here we've got our analysis tab, lots of GIS analysis we can do in here. That's not the scope for this video. Here we can change the view, we can add a catalog pane if we haven't got one added already. We can go to catalog view, which changes the whole thing to catalog. What else can we do? We can convert our 2D map into 3D. So for instance, turn our map into a local scene. This is useful for bringing data from our 2D map to our 3D map. Another useful thing, you can drag that side by side and zoom to a target area in our 2D map, and we can select link viewers. This will give us a 2D and 3D view, which we can then change and navigate around to get a new perspective on our data. Okay, next we have edit. If we have vector data in here, we can create or modify that and carry out all these tools on that data. And then onto the Imagery tab. So this is for all things related to imagery, processing or do an analysis on any satellite imagery, aerial imagery, drone or UAV data. We can use standard images and we can work with full motion video. I'll cover this in more detail in future videos, but this is very useful. Here, we can also access our raster functions. We were introduced to these in ArcMap, and here we can carry out loads of processes and apply functions to imagery, including NDVI. We're looking at vegetation. We can carry out geometric corrections to ortho-rectify imagery, as long as we have elevation data that covers the same area. And we can resample our data or extract individual bands. There's also many more than this. Again, very useful. It's worth noting at this stage, just like ArcMap, if you apply a raster function, that only exists within your map view until you save or export that data. Also in here, we can ortho-rectify imagery by creating a new workspace, or if we have some imagery that needs to be geo-referenced, we can geo-reference it here by adding ground control points. Once we create a new workspace, we can also do all our photogrammetry, block adjustment, and we can create stereo imagery products from that data. Next, we've got the Share tab. So if we want to share any of our data as a web map surface or web scene or a project template, we can do that in here. Okay, let's add some data and see what we can do with it. So here we have a mosaic data set that I created earlier. Straight away we can zoom to it. And what can we do to it? So because we've added that data, this mosaic layer tab has appeared. Here we can both change the appearance and we can look through some of the data. So on the appearance tab, this is where we can change the transparency. We can use the swipe tool. We can also orientate that north if we're not orientated north already. We can turn it on and off quickly to be able to make comparisons to the underlying data. Then we can alter the symbology. We can either do this here, or we can press the symbology button, get the symbology space to the right. We can also modify the stretch, change the resampling type. So for instance, from bilinear interpolation to nearest neighbor. Cubic convolution or majority. That doesn't look better, so I'll go back bilinear. If this was multispectral imagery, we could alter the band combinations. However, we'll leave that for a future video. Finally, we've got the DRA tool. This is useful if you have areas on your imagery which are extremely bright, you want to make out more detail, press the DRA button or dynamic range adjustment, and you'll be able to make out that detail. Thank you for listening. Look forward to future videos.